A sliver of mortar crumbled away. He could hear the specks filter into dust as they fell into the valley below. He clung more tightly to the wall. The wind was cold. It cut through the rags of his thin cloak. A lizard scuttled past. His eyes followed its little feet as they flew across the wall's worn surface. The face was weathered just enough for climbing, the sentries providing the holds which prevented his death. He closed his eyes to try to forget his peril. He was a mite against the mass of the tired old fortress. His deep breath cast a cloud about him. He watched it flow away into the evening air, and he forced his aching body up through the last disappearing wisps. It was thought to be madness to climb the walls. The chances of aged mortar simply falling away like wet sand was considered by most to be a risk too great to take. But for him there was no other way inside. The doors had been barred for longer than he could recall, the glowing lights of the inside just barely visible, their aura clearing to the horizon. He began to hear murmurs as he neared the wall's peak, murmurs rising to whispers as he desperately swung a foot over the rampart, the chill wind disappearing from his back as he rolled heavily onto the cracked tiles. He pulled his hood up, merged quickly with the shadows, and he scampered onto a nearby roof and descended towards the noise. He crept from one crumbling building to the next, towards the swarm of lanterns which marked the centre. They'd crowded together like moths, huddling together to forget the dark that slithered outside the walls. He deftly dropped to the floor of an alleyway, pressing himself to the stiff side of a wall and edging towards the burning square, focusing his eyes with the throngs of silhouettes. They drifted past, currents of colours shifting by, until the course was broken, and his eyes met his quarry. The music caught him first. The notes joined subtly to form a single elegant tune. He could hear it in the little crowd that had formed around them, cloth shifting with the whistling melody. They were a marvel, 6 little figures jerking back and forth, the strings barely visible in the cold air. Each carried a tiny carved instrument, a horn, a flute, strings made of silver. The puppeteer nowhere to be seen, hidden by the magic of the tiny stage he'd erected. He knew the strings didn't tell the whole story. He saw the families of bronze cogs which wound their way through the limbs, driving the music which flowed from beneath their cackling masks. For a while he just watched, leaning ever so slightly from the alley to let the music wash over him. The warmth spread through his body as the sounds drove away the cold with their tide. He shrunk away as a figure passed. The little characters halted, and the lingering caress of the final note eased into silence. A light applause fell about the square, before slowly petering out as the dark shapes filtered away. He crouched there, a slight swaying bundle with stiff hands and feet, his grey eyes staring into the twinkling flames of the dwindling music. As the silence clung, he watched the melody drift about the square in a quiet tapestry of brilliant colour, before dancing past the rooftops to find his place amongst the night. For a few seconds he was part of the architecture. Then he slunk back. His garbled outline was swallowed by the shadows, and the alley was left all but empty.